Welcome to the Quark and Roll podcast. I am your host, Kwok Pui Lan. Today, I am going to have a conversation with my long-term friend, Dr. Lisherwood, who teaches theology at University of Wales, Trinity, St. David. I want to congratulate her for the publication of a new anthology, which is called Their Primer on Global Theologies. And in this episode, we'll talk about her long leadership in feminist theology, body theology, and of course, global queer theologies. We will also hear her comments on the global situation today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's lovely to see you.
And can you share what are the highlights of this book and how did it come about?
It came about due to my friend Hugo Córdova Quero, who was asked, I believe, to do this book by the Council of World Mission, because they have this DARE project, which you possibly know stands for Discernment and Radical Engagement. And he was asked to edit this book and immediately said to them, apparently, only if Lisa can do it with me. And so we got going on it. And it's been an amazing project because what it's done is it's brought together 21 authors from around the world, from all the continents. And it really is an engagement with what queer theologies might be from all these different contexts, which of course is extremely important. So we have authors from India, from Latin America, from the US, of course, from the UK. And I think it's incredible. And each section, what we tried to do, and here I have to pay tribute to Hugo, we cover things from hermeneutics to Christology to apologetics. And in each of our sections, we try to get a mix from around the world so that we're getting a flavor of how queer theology in relation to these topics sits in different contexts. It was hard work because actually to find 21 authors in the first place wasn't easy, but we pulled it off. And the editing process was also very interesting because what I never want to do as a Welsh woman who speaks English in a certain way, I never want to lose the person's voice, and I think that's so important. So obviously we've got Africans writing English, Asians writing English, all sorts. And so the editing process for me was a very interesting one to try not only to keep the queer voice, but to keep the actual voice, because that's the center of everything, isn't it? So this book is going to be published, I think already is out, or next month, and we're delighted. And I really want to say thank you to the Council of World Mission, because it was a bit of a brave step on their part to actually go for a book on queer theology. There may be another one that Hugo will do from India. I hope there is, because there are a different group of people there talking from different contexts. But well done to the Council of World Mission for actually being brave, because not every Christian organization likes the word queer, which, again, I don't understand because it's not as scary as people think it is. It's just about saying there's another contextual idea in terms of theology, not about trying to convert anybody to anything. It's saying if God is alive and in the world, which we hope so, then these different perspectives are very important. We hope, as a result of this book, that different perspectives can be accepted in theology. I did talk at great length with Hugo about this. My hope is that it's no longer just considered to be a contextual theology, one of those theologies that can be easily forgotten. We know this from the history of feminist theologies. Oh, yes, that's nice. We might put it on the curriculum. You might be able to teach a course every 6 years. But it's a contextual theology, so it's not real theology. So my hope is that this particular form of theology doesn't just get stuck into that box, that actually it's something that becomes alive and well in all theological musings and thoughts. But we'll have to see.
Lisa, the one thing that I remembered most from our dear friend, Marcella Alfiers Reed, was that sentence, all theology is sexual. isn't it? It's not the contextual theologies, the queer theologies, asexual, but the traditional, the normative theologies are not. Because we have the Holy Family. Remember, we have the Virgin Mary. Those have sexual, gender relations. That is why I don't think queer theology would not be cutting across every kind of theology. It is an invitation to queer.
Yes, it is. I think Marcella was so right, but people didn't seem to understand that. I think they thought she was meaning that all theologians were sexually active with everybody and everything that moved and breathed. And of course, she didn't mean that. She meant it's bound to be. We're human beings, we're flesh and blood. And this is what I think queer theology takes up. We are flesh and blood, we are people. And as people, we have a whole range of emotions and desires and enfleshment. And queer theology is just saying, can we deal with that? And it may not even be dealing sometimes with sexual issues, but just with embodied issues. We miss her, don't we? Don't we miss her? Where she would have gone with her theology. Very exciting, but she left us too soon. But there's a lot there. There's an awful lot there still, I think. I have students who read her for the first time and are blown away and realize that there's a whole lot of theology they can do on top of that they couldn't do just reading the Fathers or something. Not that they read that very much these days, but it opens a world. It opens a world.
It certainly opens mind. And Marcella has been those kind of courageous folks who are not afraid to speak their mind and offer their wisdoms to the world. I also admire, Lisa, your long, productive life too. I know that this is not the only global queer theology book that is going to come out. You have another one in the works. Can you talk about that as well?
Yes, I can. This was, again, my saying to Hugo, if I've worked with you on that, the Wiley publishers contacted me and said, would you do a sort of textbook, but a university type textbook? And we've given it the title Global Queer Theologies, Intercontextual and Interreligious Perspectives. So again, Hugo and I have worked on it, but instead of editing it, we've actually written it. And I think if I realized how big a task that was going to be, I might have said, I'm too old now, Hugo, I'm too old, I can't be taking this on. But we cover all world religions. And as you can imagine, some of that's difficult because some of the world religions don't straight away talk about queer issues, but there's a lot in them that is very helpful in terms of queer theology. So we cover all of that, and we cover paganism and ancestral religions, which prove to be actually very interesting for queer theologies, because we include you in the book, actually, because as you said, I think a long time ago, when Christian missionaries went to Asia, they found there were not these rigid gender and sexual categories. And what I love about what you said is you said, but empire depends on white heterosexuality and homophobia. I love that. And so this is included in the book because the book not only looks at how different religions might approach different ways of being in the body and different sexualities and genders, but it puts it against a very colonial background when it needs to, about how that colonial oppression of the various kinds really tried to stamp down a much broader understanding of enfleshment and embodiment. I'm glad I took it on now, but I have to tell you that about 18 months ago, I wasn't so pleased. I was thinking, Hugo, can we ever get to the end of this? But the book takes you through right from the beginning with sections like what is gender, what is sex, what is capitalism, what is all this sort of stuff, what is colonialism. Then does a bit about the development of queer theology. How did it start? That it started as a please accept us in Christianity and has moved on to, no, we have to disrupt a lot of these categories because they haven't been helpful. So it takes you through a whole section of that and then gets into the different religions and goes through all of them, analyzes all of them in terms of what do they say. If it's something like Christianity, Judaism and Islam, what do they say? And what are more recent people saying? And then when we get into the ancestral religion, shamanism and paganism and so on, we delve in and find some very interesting approaches to what is sexuality and what is gender that has been largely stamped out by the imposition of Christianity. And so we talk about that. And Hugo does a very interesting chapter himself on migration, that how with migration, how these ideas sort of change within religions. So that's an interesting chapter. And I do my little sort of queering the cosmos dance at the end, because carrying on from Catherine Keller's really magnificent insights, the cosmos, which is our home, is the queerest place there is. Everything is changing all the time, and nothing is really that stable. And so I found that really fascinating in terms of queer theology, that it gives a way in. If this is really what we're part of, then we're changing, we're transgressive, but ourselves too. That sounds quite scary, doesn't it? But it doesn't really mean that every minute of our life we have to be transgressing. But it just means that whoever we are in our embodiment, whenever we are, is absolutely fine. That's okay. As I say, when I came across your work on that, it had to go in there. It had to go in, because I've always admired your work. And the whole colonial bit was really important. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, indeed. Obviously, it should be used in classrooms. And this is called Global Queer Theologies, Intercontextual and Interreligious Perspective.
Yeah, it should be next month.
I also want to reciprocate my gratitude to queer theologians, because when I first talk about postcolonial theology, and so empire, colonialism, power, race, and even gender were clearly categories to look at postcolonial realities. But this queering really invites me to go deeper.
Yes.
How heterosexuality, and especially with white nationalism, combined, really sustained the power that be. And to leave out this aspect will be not complete. So I really learned much from reading queer theologians like you, Marcella, and as well as others, challenging me to think about, as a heterosexual woman, in what way I benefit from the heterosexist regime. And I think that we continue to learn from each other. We in the United States are very concerned about what is happening in the last several months since the inaugural of President Donald Trump. Can you share from where you are located at Wales, you're looking at what the world is going to be like in the next several years?
We can't believe it. Those people who I speak with mostly are in utter disbelief that this can be going on. And yet those of us who know history say it happens very quickly. A fascist regime takes over very quickly, and I would call him a fascist. I hope that's not something not to be said on an American podcast, but he just is unbelievable. And what's happening in your country, how people's human rights are being taken away. When America was set up, one believes, on free speech and human rights, and not exactly do what you want, but it's a place where you can be who you want, in a sense. And it all seems to be getting eroded, and people getting picked up off the street, and universities being told they can't teach certain things, and schools can't teach certain things. And this terrible white nationalism is beyond anything that I ever thought I would see in my lifetime. I thought that was something of slavery, which is gone. And I really naively felt that kind of Christianity was over, that you couldn't argue for it anymore. And that's what we see. I read some Facebook person who said when you see a blonde woman with a cross round her neck, you want to be very afraid because this is going to be narrow, racist rhetoric. And it has, in fact, proved to be, hasn't it? So nobody here can believe it. We are not entirely happy that our government is not making more of a pushback. But again, with Russia being the threat it is to Europe, I think this is maybe why the UK government is not pushing back on Trump as much as it could do. And I wish it would do more because they want to keep America close in case this threat gets worse. But certainly everybody within my circle here can't believe it, can't believe that this form of Christianity seems to have taken, especially when Trump is no more a Christian than he is a Martian. Although he might be a Martian, but he's not a Christian. I remember the picture of him holding the Bible upside down. And I just think all these yes men, but some of which are white Christian nationalists, which is frightening because I think they're his advisors and what they're advising him. It's very scary, very scary.
Yes. What do you think theologians, especially those with these liberation or progressive perspectives, should be doing?
We should be doing a number of things, I think. In this country, it's very difficult to do anything because I've said to you many times before, we're not a particularly Christian country anymore, even though we have the name Christian. There isn't a great deal of interest in theology, and you can see the blank look come over people's faces when you say, oh, I'm a theologian. Oh, yeah. So I'm not sure what we can do within a UK context, but what we can do is all of us project ourselves out there and say, this isn't Christianity, to me, would be the first line of defense, as it were, that what you're saying is Christianity absolutely is not. And here is the evidence. And there seem to be a few theologians in the States doing that. And secondly, to start the kind of, do you realize what a restrictive society this man is setting up? And so from a liberation perspective, women, do you want to lose the vote? Gay people, do you want to be exterminated? Because I understand that a lot of the Christian right there are saying that gay and lesbian people should be executed publicly, which, again, I never, ever thought I would hear from the States. I thought I would hear that from here more than from the States. So we have to just keep speaking a very strong alternate message, don't we really? And to say, based on really good scholarship, this is not in any way Christianity. This is not in any way what the States was set up and attack this manifest destiny idea that seems to be behind quite a lot of this theological rubbish. It has to be deconstructed in the most extreme terms. And more than that, an alternative put forward, because as we found with feminism in the early days, it's very easy to deconstruct. It's not that easy to reconstruct or, alternatively, to offer significant and workable alternatives. This is the work I think theologians have to do. And I know that we've talked and you've said, if theologians don't speak, if theologians don't do something, what are we going to say to the next generation? And I absolutely agree, Prelan. What would we say to the next generation? Oh, I'm awfully sorry that all your rights have been taken away. I didn't do anything. We have to. From the smallest actions of resistance to the biggest actions of theological deconstruction.
I agree with you. That is, as theologians, we need to be speaking in the public square even more. If we have not done so before, we need to try. And if we have already done so, this is a time to amplify our voices. As you said, we need to create an alternative possibility for thinking about God's love is inclusive for everyone, for the immigrants, for those people who may have conservative political views, who are not thinking along the same wavelength as ours. And as you can see, we have escalating political violence in the United States and also in different parts of the world. This is really alarming, isn't it?
Yes, it's extremely alarming. I find that to look at the news these days is heartbreaking because there's no good news anywhere. That you think, why are people doing this? We're all human beings, aren't we? And this rhetoric, we've got, not in Wales, but in England, people putting up the St. George cross, which they say is England because we have to love our country. And my answer to that is, no, we have to love our fellow human beings. Doesn't matter what bit of land they sit on. They are the important things. People are the important things. And it makes me laugh too, Prelan, because St. George was a Turk. So all these English people going, St. George and the flag. They wouldn't let St. George into this country if he knocked on the door. So it does make me laugh a bit. But we have to get away from this absolute, this piece of land is mine. I own it. This is what it looks like because I'm on it. And we have to get to who are the humans we're dealing with? Who are the other people that we're talking to? How can we together have a much richer conversation and a much richer way of life, much richer environment, for goodness sake? Within the UK, if the Reform Party stopped immigration and some of them would want to throw out the immigrants we would have no health service because it's almost exclusively personed by people of different ethnicities. And no health service, probably the teaching profession would be denuded, social services would be denuded. I don't know what they're talking about. And it's not that people are coming in as lesser servants of these systems. They're coming in and they're running the systems. Many have been here for generations. And I just don't understand that rhetoric. And I find it so enriching to talk to people with different backgrounds and how do you sit in the world? How do you see the world? Which part of the world have you come from? What's it like there? Should we adopt some of those ideas here? It's an enriching conversation, isn't it? It's not threatening. It doesn't have to be threatening. And it breaks my heart.
Yes.
It breaks my heart.
You are a leader of the feminist movement and body movement. When you look back, sometimes my students will say, see, you people have worked so hard and see, we have very right-wing politicians. And would you look back saying that we have contributed something? Or is the work that we have done not counted at all or was in vain?
On a bad day, I think the work we've done counts for nothing. And on a good day, when students still want to study feminist theology, I say we have done something. We have actually brought a lot of these questions into the debate that weren't there before. And from within feminist theology, I remember, I am so glad that white Western women have realized we are not global, we are not the global sisterhood. There was this naive view, wasn't there, that, oh, yeah, we know what women are, we know what it's like. And so that's been exciting. I'm really delighted looking back. Feminist theology, when I came into it more or less in the early days, I was a little bit behind the first ones, but came into it then. There seemed to be, with a lot of theologians, not all, not people like Rosemary Ruther, I don't think, but with a lot, this idea that it's about Western women. Western women are the people we're talking about. And I am so delighted that conversation is no longer the case. That, and particularly about white women, Audre Lorde took Mary Daly to task, I think, about it. And I'm glad, because there was this very, I don't know whether it was a deliberate decision or whether it was just complete and utter naivety or somebody hadn't said, do you realize you're not the only women on the planet? Because I remember I was at a conference in the States, it may have been the hour, and the speaker, who was a Black woman, said, do you realize that Black people are the majority in the world? You white people are the minority. And the white woman sitting behind me went, that's not right, is it? That isn't right. And I thought, how can you think that? Of course that's right. We are a minority, absolute minority. So why are we speaking as though we are the majority and though we know it all? So that development has been fantastic. That this whole idea the women speaking, it's a range of voices, an absolute range of voices speaking from different contexts, different experiences. And the whole postcolonial sort of conversation now is absolutely amazing, and it lights me up. I'm so excited by it that I think, on the one hand, I feel guilt. Oh my goodness, was it my people? The Welsh were colonised too, but yes, I do know that a lot of Welsh people went out and did a lot of colonising too. So there's guilt, but there's also absolute excitement that we're now seeing it, and we can now, certainly in our subject anyway, we can face it, and we can start to unpack what a post-colonial theology might look like. Because again, we've had to work out what a feminist theology, but what would a feminist post-colonial theology look like? And there's very exciting work there. And I have to say, I love your work about the Anglican Church. And I remember in a conversation with you years ago saying, have you thought about the word Anglican? And I hadn't. Now I do. Yes, absolutely. It's been such a colonization in the name of religion too, hasn't it?
Yes, it's almost the spiritual arm of the empire, unfortunately. That is much of Anglican mission. And that is why I think this post-colonial studies of Anglicanism is very important. And I thank you for your encouragement and accompaniment. And what would your advice to the upcoming generation of younger people, scholars, who want to do feminist theology or queer theology?
I think I go back to what my dear friend Asphodel Long, who was a Jewish scholar, independent scholar, but a wonderful woman. She used to run feminist theology classes in her old people's home. And she used to say, if you're going to read feminist theology, please remember your life will never be the same again. So that is always my warning to them. If you're going to read it, if you're going to understand it, your life will never be the same again. So be prepared for that. And I have seen that with a number of students who've come along. Oh, don't be silly. Of course, my life will be the same again. And they've been very shocked at the fundamental changes they found. Most they could cope with, some they couldn't. And I think it's the same with queer theology too. Be prepared, your life will never be the same again. You'll have been invited to look at things very differently. With queer theology, you're not going to be asked to be queer in the sense of you're not going to be asked to not be heterosexual anymore, if that's what you are, but you're going to be asked to look at it and see how it sits in the world and how it positions you in the world. Just with any other sexuality or gender, how are you positioned in the world? That is always what I say to my students. It won't ever be the same. You're on a very exciting journey that, in fact, I want you to contribute to. This is not the end. Whatever has been written so far, and it's not the end, get in there, engage. And a student of mine did that in a very exciting way through art, through saying, I want to take this whole thing of sexuality and gender on through art, and wrote the most amazing PhD out of that. And there are all sorts of creative ways that younger people are engaging with theology, who can be bothered to engage with theology. And I think it's an exciting time. I think it's an exciting time. And it's not just younger people. I had a 92-year-old student, and she got her PhD at 95. And she blew everything apart. I said, are you sure you've come this far? Are you really sure you want to do this? I do, she said. And she came up with very exciting stuff. So it's there for, I think, a lot of people who maybe with queer theology start very gently and think it's one thing and then realize, oh my goodness, the implications are massive. But I do think, Bhuilan, these are subjects not only worth studying, but absolutely vital in the world in which we live, because we've got to find multiple ways to push back what is definitely a right-wing movement, not just in America, but in many countries, and we need to push it back. And say on a bad day, I sit here and I think, what have we all dedicated our lives to what's happened. And on a good day, I think at least we're all still in the job. At least there's still stuff to say. There's still stuff to be pushed back at. And of course, that's a joke because we're in a fight. We're not just in a job. But it's very rewarding. I tell students it's possibly one of the most rewarding things you'll do. And at the end of it, they agree. In the process, they may not agree, but in the end, they agree.
Thank you very much. And for all the work you do, because Lisa, you are not only a prolific, productive writer, you have edited many anthologies and as a midwife to many newer voices joining the theological conversation. I thank you for that. And thank you very much for joining the podcast. I hope you enjoy the podcast, and please comment and subscribe. I will see you in the next episode.